Hi everyone, this is Dr. Heather Austin Robillard, and today's lecture will be prevention research. The purpose of this PowerPoint is to go over the different theories and strategies that are used to develop a comprehensive prevention program. In this lecture, the four main things I'll be going over are what is a good theory and some of the substance abuse prevention models that are used. We will go in depth with talking about the risk and protective factors approach, and we also will talk about the Center for Substance Abuse Prevention strategies that are the most effective in prevention programs. Why do we study prevention theory in the first place? Well, the simple answer is that we are trying to reduce problems or eliminate problems in our society. Theories in general help us identify ways that we can prevent a specific problem in our community. This allows us to take the guesswork out of the planning. We also need to study the different strategies used within these that make these theories possible. A theory specifically for substance abuse prevention needs to focus on the different factors that predict substance abuse. It should also explain the mechanisms for how these factors operate. We will need to identify the internal and external variables that influence these specific mechanisms, including things like cultural factors. A substance abuse prevention theory should predict specific points that interrupt the path to substance abuse, and it specifies certain interventions that we want to use in order to do this. In science, a theory is accepted as a dominant view about a specific phenomenon. Thomas Kuhn distinguished specific phases in theory development. The first phase is pre-paradigm. This is before a theory is developed. Then next, the anomaly stage is where we start to question specific things about this phenomenon in order to develop a theory. And then in the crisis stage, we're critiquing that theory. We're asking an abundance of questions to try to determine whether there could be some alternative ways of looking at this social problem. The revolution process allows the new theory to establish itself. And then lastly, the post-revelation phase has two components. It's scientific rigor, which is when the theory in the program is tested and shown to have consistent outcomes over again. And then praxis. Praxis is when the theory and practice are combined. It is the practice of a theory prevention formed by good theory. So let's take a look at some of these models or theories and approaches to substance abuse. The first one we're going to look at is the health belief model. In this model, people are motivated to change only as much as they value or worry about a specific change. The results of their choices and the expectation of their results rely on them being confident that they can carry out this new change. The stages of change model is one you may have heard of. This was created by Prochaska and DiClemente, and it's used to alter personal behavioral change that leads to a long-term behavioral change. It also identifies where this person's desire or motivation for change is. The first stage is pre-contemplation. This is where they're either not aware or they're refusing to acknowledge the risks of their behavior. Then contemplation is the beginning of them considering to change. They're weighing the pros and cons of possibly changing. Preparation is where they have either made the decision or are planning to change. And then action is when they actually implement this change and they start doing that new behavior. And then the last one, which is kind of a circular part of this process, is them maintaining or making a habit out of this new behavior. The stages of change leads into this next approach or model, which is the Stanford Communication Behavior Change Model. And this is when we are targeting change through mass media. Messages that are following these specific steps. One, they are to raise awareness about a specific issue. The goal is to change what people know, believe, or think about a specific problematic behavior. Then we're teaching them a skill that's needed for a new behavior. We attempt to build people's confidence in order to perform this behavior. And then we're providing them support in how to sustain the new behavior. Now, with this model, it's very important that we're targeting people at their level of change, which is talked about in the previous model of how to get to identify that. Another popular approach to prevention is the community organization or an environmental change theory. In community organizational theory, there is a drive for the community to be active in their involvement and development that addresses specific health and society needs, that addresses specific health and social problems. The key features of this theory are we need to understand what the root cause of the problem is. We want to focus on specific concerns rather than general concerns. We need to engage in effective problem-solving techniques, encourage an active community participation, and gain the power to produce long-lasting change. With this, in the environmental change theory, community is concerned with changing specific local laws, regulations, or policies. So for example, if a community recognizes an alcohol problem, then they come together to change a law, a regulation, or a policy within their local community. This allows to influence behavioral change in the individuals much more than just targeting a few people. So in your book, one of the models that's most talked about is the risk and protective factors. This is similar to the medical model theory in that it suggests that limiting a number of risk factors and increasing a number of protective factors within individuals can reduce substance abuse. Risk factors are anything that increase the chance of a problem behavior occurring in an individual, whereas protective factors are anything that reduce the likelihood of an individual participating in a problematic behavior. In order to be included in a risk factor or protective factor, the factor must be tested and shown consistent effects in multiple studies. It must be shown to predict a specific problematic behavior. So within substance abuse, in order to be considered a risk factor, it has to have shown in several studies that it predicts substance abuse within individuals. Some of the community risk factors include having the availability of drugs in their community, that their community laws and norms are actually more favorable to drug use, like community festivals that might promote substance use. Another part of community factors would be the inability to transition out of the community or a decreased likelihood for upward mobility in the community, or having a low neighborhood attachment towards outside resources, or just a general disorganization of the community. The last one is that the economic deprivation also predicts substance abuse in a community. Another risk factor are the family risk factors. Some of the ones in particular are conflict as a risk factor for substance abuse, unhealthy communication, even leading to emotional, physical, or verbal abuse, parental attitudes towards drugs, and also parental drug use themselves is a risk factor. And then lastly, family management, something similar to supervision. Then there are school risk factors. These might include early and persistent antisocial behavior, academic failure beginning in elementary school, a lack of commitment to school, like skipping classes. Some of the individual and peer risk factors include things like alienation or isolation, rebellious behaviors, or engaging in friendships of individuals who use substances or have a favorable attitude towards substance use. And then early age of first experimentation with alcohol and drugs is a common predictor with substance abuse. Okay, let's look at some of the protective factors that actually increase or that reduce the likelihood for individuals to participate in substance or to have substance abuse problems. This might be individual characteristics like self-control, parental monitoring, bonding, academic competency, or a strong community attachment. There's also social development strategies that foster healthy beliefs and clear standards of drug use. They promote positive outcomes for enhancing protective factors, kind of like that healthy belief model talked about in the beginning of the lecture. Lastly, I want to touch on some of the important strategies to use along with your theory. Now, these strategies were discussed by SAMHSA's Center for Substance Abuse Prevention. Now, these are promoted and found to be used in the most comprehensive prevention programs. The first strategy is information dissemination. It just provides general awareness and knowledge of the nature and effects of substance use, addiction, and the different services in the community. However, information dissemination is not effective by itself, so we need more strategies to go along with this in order for it to be effective. Also, the use of authority figures like a principal or a police officer when presenting this information doesn't often translate as well for adolescents. Another strategy is prevention education. This involves a two-way communication between the facilitator or educator and the participant or adolescent. They aim to affect critical life and social skills and didactic approaches, which are one-on-one or just a couple people. They tend to be the least effective way of presenting this education, whereas more interactive approaches are far more effective. And in fact, peer-led educational interventions are the most effective. Also, programs that last longer than a year, or there's some follow-up boosters years later, are also increase the effectiveness of this prevention program. Another part of prevention education that is important is having workshops that are improving on the parenting skill along with improving on the adolescent skill concurrently. Another strategy is alternative activities. This again is one that is not effective on its own. This strategy just simply emphasizes participation in activities that are outside of substance use. One-shot community alternative activities are not effective. It needs to be something that's going to happen multiple times. But it can serve as a very strong community statement when there's a celebration of no use. This also leads into some community-based practices that are aimed at enhancing the community's ability to provide effective prevention programs. This includes organization, planning, and coalition building, which we'll talk about later in the semester. Environmental strategies can establish change in the written and unwritten community standards and attitudes. This is separated into two activities, one related to legal regulation and those related to service and action-oriented initiatives. Some examples related to regulation might be increasing the price of alcohol, which has been shown to increase the drinking age and has been effective among youth. An example of action-oriented initiatives would be including more sober dorms in university campuses. And the last strategy is problem identification and referrals. This aims at identifying individuals who have substance problems and assessing if their behavior can be changed through education. Family therapy is also another effective resource in improving the family functioning, which can increase the protective factors and reduce likelihood of substance abuse. Understanding prevention strategies is an important component to prevention planning and can increase the effectiveness of your prevention program. Now, when deciding on how to fit your theories into your substance abuse prevention strategies, it's important to think about web of influence and the continuum of prevention. Web of influence has several different domains, including individuals, peers, family, school, community, and society. This can help when focusing on each one or multiple of these domains. You can help identify how risk and protective factors interact and where your prevention theories need to apply. A continuum of prevention model classifies prevention programs to their audiences that are best suited based on the risks of substance abuse. The three different types of audiences include universal, so this might be all students at a specific school. This is aimed at reaching the general population. Selective programs target specific groups like children of alcoholics, whereas they are at an above average risk of substance abuse. Lastly, indicated is targeted at those individuals who are at a high risk for substance abuse problems. This includes people with problems like antisocial, truancy, or very early age of use. And that ends the end of the prevention research PowerPoint.